that our next guest will be a part of our lineup.
Wow.
I can say this. We want him to be.
Yes.
There's negotiations happening.
Yeah, it's always tough.
But it's always kind of like the Brandon Ayuk thing.
Yeah.
It's always tough.
There's some holdouts.
It really, because the whole thing is like negotiations is where it's like, well, I deserve this because I do this and this. And then the other side, like, we have to be like, yeah, but remember those times you were late? And then remember that one time when your hair looked weird? Like, and it gets all personal. And then in the end, everything works.
Yeah, exactly.
So I'm rooting for it, but that's above our pay grade.
True.
Joining us right now from The Athletic, the one, the only, the pretty much a French citizen at this point, Sam Amick. Sam, was it all told 32 days over there for you?
32 days, my friends.
Wow.
July 10th to August 12th. My French did not get better along the way. We are still limited to, merci and bonjour, but happy to be back. I mean, Dave, you and I talked during your trip, and honestly, ours was half personal, half vacation, and then the Olympics. But it was a cool adventure. We're blessed to be able to do stuff like that. So it was pretty neat.
Any language barrier issues at any point that caused anything for you, Sam?
Language barrier issues.
Yeah, Sam, did you have any issues while you were over there?
Yeah, I had a few. Well, that's a whole different story. I've told Dave, I think we talked on the past shows about I'm traumatized by my getting locked out. I'll get over it. I need to go to therapy for that, for the Airbnb experience.
Right.
It's funny. The first language story that comes to mind that reflects poorly on me, but it's kind of funny, is that I finally landed back at SFO, right? And so the family's back home. I'm by myself. 11-hour plus flight. We landed SFO. I had a pretty decent aisle seat where, like, it's one of those where it's not right in the little aisleway. It's kind of pushed off to the back of the plane, so you have more space to yourself. So it's me and one other guy, right? And when we land, this guy, it's a French man, looks at me and he's asking, in kind of broken English, do you know where this street is? And he shows me his phone, and it's all French on his phone. And I said, like, can I use Google Translate to take a picture of your, directions on your phone so I can understand? And then he just looks at me and goes, but I speak English.
Whoopsie.
Now, I know, because I heard it through the old grapevine, that you, I believe, have addressed this on this station, but I wasn't here. So all I know, he says, ignoring the fact that they had a 45-minute talk while they were in Europe and went over the story already. But for the audience, all I know is that you had a little bit of trouble getting into your abode when you got there. And that was a key issue, I assume. Maybe it was dark. I don't know. I'm sure it wasn't user error.
Yes, it was Airbnb in Lille. The backstory is that I was too slow on the draw to reserve a Marriott room at the local Marriott, which is what we normally would do. So I get this Airbnb, and on the first night, and this part, it's fine. I can be honest and transparent publicly. Me and a few other sports writers might have been out having a couple beverages, and I don't think that helped my tactile kind of skill. And so, but the thing I did not necessarily see coming is that I had already been in the apartment for the first time, but at night when the lights are out, literally in the hallway, it's got like sensors that go off every 10 seconds. And so just that physical mental experience of, okay, there's 3 different locks. There's 2 different keys. I don't even know which one goes where. I'm turning. I can't get the door to open. And then because of my, somewhat impacted state, then it's like the panic sets in, like, oh my God, I'm a French homeless person. Like, this is happening, Finally got in that night. But then the worst one obviously was a couple of days later, where this one was not my fault, where in the middle of the day, the latch on the door on the inside had gotten stuck on the deadbolt, and I spent 8 to 9 hours waiting for the locksmith. That was super fun.
I'm just here for that first night, though.
Yeah.
I understand the key, stupid French. Well, you made it in. Did you happen to try any of those supersized croissants like RG3 did, or anything like that?
Not the huge ones. No, the food was good, though. It's funny. I had a lot of my colleagues I felt like I was working really hard, and I was, to be honest, but I kept hearing different media members that were just like, man, I haven't had a real meal yet. And I was very confused because in the spots I was at, even when you're busy, if you broke away from the venues at all, it's just, the cafe life in France is wild. I mean, there's just everywhere you go, it's like 30 feet this way. Let me sit down and have a really good meal. So the food was fantastic.
Was there fancy music playing at the cafes like in the movies or no?
No, if anything, and this is partly a sports venue thing more than the restaurants, but there's this fascinating, funny culture of like all the corny American songs from 10 to 15 years ago are like all the rave over there. And like the one that became like the anthem of the Olympics, I forget the artist, but Freed from Desire was this song that is just forever going to be playing in my head. Because in the chorus, it's na 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 freed from desire, and you'd be at a basketball game with 25,000 people just going na 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 na, like as if they took happy pills. So it was quite a scene, but no, not as much accordions and French music.
Wow.
I know when we last talked, Sam, you were ultimately making your way to Paris because you were in Lille, as you said, and then that's where like some of that competition really ramped up. And you just talked about the in-arena atmosphere. It sounded great on TV, but there's nothing quite like being there. What was, especially the final, or even the game where the Team USA was in real trouble against Serbia, but what was the atmosphere like there?
Yeah, it was fantastic. In the beginning of the Paris segment, Jay, it was a little bit of a letdown, the games in Paris, because compared to the ones in Lille, the venue was bigger. It was like 25,000. They were packing it. And so the early games were not as electric. The early Paris games, not as electric as the Lille games, but it certainly got better quickly by the time you got to Serbia, US, and France, US. Those were incredible environments. For me, the lasting memories of the two games are going to be very different. The semifinal, and this is just part of the job, my responsibility, we had two people, myself and Joe Varden, focusing on basketball over there. And so I needed to write the story about France beating Germany and likely setting up the rematch against the US, right? So I was on this game story, and I didn't want to just write about France winning. I wanted to write about the possible rematch. But I was also assuming that the US would take care of business against Serbia. So the point is this. You write 600-700 words, including, quotes from French players talking about Joel Embiid, talking about the U.S. players. I shaped my entire story about the likely rematch, and the story had already published. We had just said, like, this appears to likely happen, and this is coming up next. Well, then Serbia basically says, well, hold on a second. We got something to say about it. So as that game is unfolding and Serbia is way out ahead, I'm having to honestly kind of panic and be like, oh, cool, great. Our story is going to be completely unusable if Serbia wins this game. So unfortunately, in the semifinal, I did not lock in on the action. I was sitting there writing another story. So that you didn't really get to soak up the amazingness of that game. The gold medal game was the exact opposite for me from the standpoint of I got a media seat that is called Untabled, which ended up being a really cool experience because it's a fancy way of saying we're putting you in the stands, not on press row. So I sat in the stands with a bunch of French folks and some other media members. And honestly, by the time Steph Curry is going crazy late and those people are seeing it for the first time, presumably, that was something I'll certainly always remember. So that was fun.
Do you think there's any chance that Serbia used your story as bulletin board material?
Like in real time? Yeah.
Maybe
Jokic read it to the team.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Like, hey, Sam doesn't think we're going to win. Let's go show them.
Yeah.
We all know how locked in the Joker is on all things media.
Yes, exactly.
In. Sam, you work for The Athletic, and like most, if not all, online-based publications these days, it's very easy to track how different stories do, what is successful, what is not, based on, clicks and views and forwards and all that fun stuff. They have all kinds of numbers. I'm curious, Which does better numbers? The United States team beating or losing to France?
Probably losing,
Mhm.
but it did Team USA did very good numbers all the way through. And I'll say, and this is getting in the weeds media wise, but there's a distinction where, like Joe Varden, I mentioned earlier, is kind of our Team USA beat writer. When he publishes a story that's on the game and it's published, let's say 30 minutes, 15 minutes after the conclusion of the game, that story is going to get a massive audience. The stuff, admittedly, that I will do a lot, which is try to come in with perspective from post game and put a little more context on what went on. The audience is not as great because you have this, especially in the Olympics. There are so many sports going on. There's so much to capture your attention that what we learned kind of the first time the Athletic has done the Olympics is that, the audience is pretty fleeting. Like you have a fairly short window after every event where they are locked in and they want to read everything about it. But if you wait too long, then they're going to move on to the next track meet or, swimming or gymnastics or whatever it might be. But to your question, I mean, yeah, like leading up to the gold medal game, Dave, every story that we would write that would talk about some level of concern that Team USA might lose, like that certainly was something the public found interesting.
Yeah, because I think the last time we did talk, Sam, I think you had said that, like, I think it was the night before. I could have days wrong, but like where Steve Kerr was basically kind of going at the media, for lack of a better terms, of like, hey, stop worrying about who's not playing. Like, we're just trying to win. There's certainly a sense of pressure. And then when they actually did win, and as difficult as it was, what was then the reaction? I mean, to me, it just from here, it looked like a certainly celebration, but just a sense of relief, because that certainly wasn't easy for these guys.
No, it wasn't. And honestly, to be corny for a second, it was neat to watch and almost kind of reassuring. I don't know if that's not the perfect word, but to see these, prominent, filthy rich NBA players find so much meaning in getting the job done, I thought was special. And, you see, like Carmelo Anthony did an interview the other day, and this is a divisive topic, but talking about how for him winning a gold medal is more meaningful than if he had ever won an NBA title. And that kind of pride that these guys really did have is there, but it's also, I give the guys who choose to play credit because, man, it is a kind of an incredibly dicey proposition when you talk about the risk versus reward, because the risk of infamy is great. And the reward, like certainly this team will be remembered because they won the gold in pretty entertaining fashion. So it's not as if they're not going to get praise or reward, but the risk, I would argue, is far greater if you fall short. We all remember the 2004 team. LeBron was on that team, obviously Carmelo, Larry Brown coaching it. Like if you don't win the gold as an American, male basketball player and a woman for that matter, because their streak is even longer, then that jumps out a whole lot more than you winning.
Sam Amick joining us. You're over there. It's an experience, and I know that you could probably list all day the obvious differences, but you've been to NBA Finals games, you've been to deciding games, you've seen that atmosphere, you've felt it, and you're at that gold medal game in which the road team is Team USA and the host of the entire games is in the finals. I'm not talking about like, hey, there's a lot more different languages in the crowd, or they serve French fries and gravy at the concessions as far as the difference goes. I'm saying just pure atmosphere. What's some of the differences you noticed?
So for one, I would love to see the metrics or the data on who bought tickets, because it ended up being more of an American crowd than I thought it would be.
Wow.
Because Joel Embiid did not get booed in the gold medal game like he had in previous games. So that's a decent sign that you had more Americans in the crowd. I would then probably yield to friend and colleague. So Marcus Thompson wrote a really good column about Steph, and it was a unique point of view because Marcus has written a book about Steph, covered his entire career. But at the same time, for this event, Marcus's assignment was track and field, and he didn't personally attend any of the basketball games. But because of his ties to Steph, he decided to write a column after the fact on what it all meant, right? And what I loved about what he wrote is that he essentially talked about the fact that Steph Curry did Steph Curry things. We have seen this before. As great as this was, we have seen things like that before. What made it so unique was that it was the first ever introduction to France, to Europe, to this entire part of the world that had not seen it in person. And you could feel that in the building. You really could. You know, the awe and the shock from not just fans, but media members, international media members. You know, there was a wonderful guy named Adrian, who's a Spanish reporter who I got to know. And when I first met him and he heard what my job was and the fact that I spent all my time covering the NBA, he just looked and shook his head and he was like, you have a good job. This is a very good job. And he was amazed by the talent level of the American players. And so that dynamic was on full display. And when Steph is going bonkers in those last couple minutes, you know, you are just hearing the oohs and ahs all the way throughout the building. And it was fresh and it was new. And even for me, who's seen it from Steph a million times, I mean, that last three from the right side with two guys lunging at him, I mean, might have recency bias, but I'm probably putting that number one on his personal list. So it was pretty wild.
You know, Sam, much like if we were talking about the NBA in a big picture, we'd say, hey, look, watch out for the Spurs and Victor Wembanyama because it just feels like his time. Is there a same sense of that with France and Wembanyama, what he did in this tournament, knowing that in 4 years it's going to be on American soil? Wembanyama's got 4 more years behind him. Team USA will look a little different. Like, is there a feeling about general, I don't know, fear is the right thing, but just watch out, here comes France and Victor Wembanyama?
Yeah, there are. I mean, no question, not only because of Victor, but they've got another young crop of, you know, lottery prospects, NBA players that are expected to be part of that next team. You know, it's funny because you got the Rudy Gobert component where it certainly seemed like Rudy's role is diminished on the national team now, and he's on the older side. But they have a heck of a young crew coming up. So I think France is on that list. Serbia is on that list. Germany is still on that list. You know, there's a lot of good teams. Australia has a lot of question marks about their program. Patty Mills is you know, probably done, and he's been leading the way for them. But you really did see from France on down how tight the margin has become. And it makes, you know, I know it's 4 years away, but it really does make the conversation about the next USA Olympic team very interesting because, you know, you got LeBron and Steph saying they're probably not doing it again. I mean, LeBron will be 43 years old. Durant acting like he probably won't do it again. Although I wonder if he'll be incentivized, because I didn't really realize this till the other day. I mean, he could be the only, or, you know, or he could tie to be the only Olympian to have 5 medals in the same sport. The wrestler from Cuba did it in these games, and that was a record. But, you know, Durant's future with the team is in question. You have the Jason Tatum not playing very much component where he was expected to be one of the leaders of the younger crew. Anthony Edwards obviously, you know, carried himself well, but it's not really clear what that team looks like. Devin Booker is probably on his way to being, like, I think he really would care about being an Olympic legend for Team USA. So that's a guy that I think you can count on, but a lot of question marks there.
It's funny because that's honestly one of the more fascinating stories about this U.S. Olympic team, Sam, is that there were 3 Celtics on it, number one, and none of them were Jaylen Brown, who's like the highest paid player in the league. And then the NBA Finals MVP gets the least amount of playing time in Jason Tatum. The whole Celtic storyline with Team USA was just weird. And, you know, for somebody who's not a Celtics fan, kind of enjoyable watching Boston fans lose it.
Yeah, it was strange. You know, really it came down to, you know, Booker obviously had Steve Kerr's confidence more than Jason Tatum. Anthony Edwards was part of that calculus as far as, you know, a wing coming off the bench. And Tatum didn't play well in the early games. wasn't stretching the floor because he wasn't hitting his three very well. And, honestly, down the road or down the stretch, and I get his frustration, but I think he probably could have done a better job of handling the frustration from a body language standpoint. I mean, there was just a lot of camera shots with him sitting on that bench, pretty clearly not excited, for his teammates, even in spite of what he was going through. So that was a little bit uncomfortable. A gold medal, let alone winning, is the best sanitizer. And so for Steve Kerr, that stuff kind of falls by the wayside, but certainly strange. Even, the day after the Americans won the gold, I decided on the flight home to write a story about all the different relationship components on this team and which guys might join up on NBA teams down the road. And as I wrote it, it was not lost on me that all of my speculation, took place outside of the Celtics because they have a good thing going and they are the champs. And, they're not part of that conversation because that conversation is born out of, like being on a team that is not good enough. And Boston obviously is in a great place.
By the way, sorry, Jason, I just got corrected. Jaylen Brown was the MVP, not Jason Tatum. Although Jason Tatum should have been the MVP, and anyone knows basketball.
People like me didn't vote for Jaylen. Yeah, thanks, buddy.
Go ahead. Jason.
Just on the observant side about not playing, did Halliburton seem to handle it better? Didn't he, or is that?
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
I think his stuff was like pretty clearly communicated early on. I'd be curious to learn more about, like with Tatum. Didn't seem like the communication was at a typical Steve Kerr high level. After the gold medal game, Tatum was asked if he was going to have any kind of meeting with the Team USA folks or with Steve to get a better understanding of why it went down the way it went down. And he kind of dismissively shrugged and was just like, we won. Like, I don't need to go down that road. So, but no, Halliburton handled it well. I mean, he had that hilarious tweet, obviously, after about, being the guy who gets an A on a group project without doing anything. He knew he was there by and large as an insurance policy. If a Steph Curry went down, if a Devin Booker went down, I think Tyrese would have been important, but that obviously didn't happen.
Last thing for you. We'll save the easiest question till last. So this whole Noah Lyles world champions argument, we had this conversation, Jason and I did earlier in the week. So you give the Olympic team the same amount of prep that they got for the Olympics, the occasional practice, then the training camp, whatever, except you take the three Celtics off of the Olympic team and you replace them with whoever, the next three best teams. And this year's Olympic team plays this year's Boston Celtics in a 7-game series under those circumstances. Who wins?
Man, I love you, buddy, but that was like such a tricky breakdown. I might need a shorter version of that.
Who wins, Team USA or the Boston Celtics? 7-game series.
We're taking obviously only American version of the Boston Celtics, or no?
No. Because
the champion Celtics, right?
Oh, the champion Celtics.
Yes, exactly. Sam said, "I love you, buddy," but that was just.
And then you have to replace the three Celtics.
That's what I was saying.
Yeah,
because you get obviously Jason Tatum can't play on both. So
Tatum. So the three Celtics are staying with Team USA.
No, the three Celtics, the Boston Celtics, this is my fault. The Boston Celtics, were.
We have our kid about to go to college in 2 minutes, and I'm getting distracted.
Okay, that's okay.
Yeah. I think that, I'd probably give it to the Celtics. Although it's hard to even say that out loud. With the talent that's on the other team, but every night Team USA had to figure out how to function. And, that's the biggest thing. You're talking about a 30-day window where you gotta figure it out. So that Celtics team, while the fans might not want to give them their flowers, was historically one of the most dominant of all time. And in the playoffs, before they dropped a game late in the finals, like they were en route to be on a pretty short list in terms of dominance. So I don't know. That's a bit of a toss up for me, or toss up. But I'll give it to the champs.
Sam Amick, the Athletic, doing yeoman's work back from France. Kid going to college. My kid's a senior as of yesterday. Sam, I feel your pain, but yours is slightly worse. So say hello to everybody and good luck, because soon, Sam, Our kids will be gone. They'll never call us back, and we'll be steps closer to the end.
Wow.
I mean, this is it. We're 30 minutes away. We are hitting the road right now to
All right.
go send the first one off. So,
Attababe.
Nice.
Congratulations, Dad. Talk to you soon.
thanks, guys. See
All
ya.
right, bye. That's Sam Amick. We'll take a break.
Say
When we
hi,
come
Dad.
back. That's a good callback. When we come back, NFL news.